first of all, just talk about the report, if you like. And, I think just to commend, obviously, my colleagues on the committee for the really good and detailed report that was considered and developed a number of weeks ago. But I suppose it's startling how there are two classes of people in this country today. There are the insiders and there are the outsiders. For most citizens, they've experienced about 31 separate price hikes over 2021 alone. Even farmers have experienced a tripling of the cost of fertilizer. Home energy costs have increased by 50%. And inflation in November was at a 20-year high. So in real terms, the vast majority of citizens have seen their income reduce. Their purchasing power has been reduced over the last 12 months. So, in real terms, these people have suffered. So the government have refused to deal with that income reduction in terms of postponing the carbon tax, have refused to go to the EU looking for a VAT derogation on fuel, etc., and have offered people about €100 to deal with the staggering increases in the cost of living. And on the flip side, then you have another class of people in the state. That's the Secretary General, who has had an income increase of nearly 40% in the space of a year. Income has gone from €211,000, Minister, to €298,000. So, an increase in income, which would be, a dream to be the total income of most people in this country, would just simply dream that 90,000 differential would be achieved as their total income. And the report, I think is quite clear at this stage that this was done. The figure was plucked out of the air. There was no process. There was no international comparators whatsoever. And the government had no system whereby that was verifiable, that was comparable, can be measured or challenged really in any way. So, obviously, I think the court of public opinion will see this as insiders looking after insiders very, very clearly. The first question I'd have is the Secretary General, that new wage, is that now a benchmark for other salaries within the public service?
Thank you very much, Deputy Tobin. First of all, if I can just comment on your earlier remarks and to acknowledge that so many people across the country are really feeling the pressure of the inflation cycle that we're experiencing at the moment. It is higher than was envisaged, and it's likely to remain higher for longer than was anticipated. And back in the budget, as you know, in October, the forecast from the Department of Finance was that inflation would average about 2.2% across 2022. It is now likely to be higher than that. And as we know from recent CSO and Eurostat figures, it's well in excess of 5% at the most recent measure. So that is a concern. The government did respond in the budget with the information we had at that time, with a package of well over €1 billion on tax reductions, which many people across the House don't support, but it is one way of giving workers more money back in their pocket, and also through targeted social welfare improvements. So well over €1 billion between both of those, and many of the measures on the welfare side in particular were targeted, including the immediate change that came into effect on budget night through the fuel allowance, extending the eligibility. I think some very welcome change. Carers allowance, means test and so on, that wouldn't have been changed for well over a decade. So we did make changes that I think will help. Does it go far enough? I think you can never go far enough at the moment, given the level of inflation that is there. We are conscious of it. That is why we are bringing forward the electricity credit of €113.50, including VAT, and we will continue to keep it under review, because we know that people are feeling pressure at this time, and the issue is actively being examined and kept under review. In relation to the report that you spoke about there, and again, I acknowledge the work that went into the report and the findings of the report. You will have heard what I said earlier on by way of action points that I am instituting myself as minister, having considered the issues. I mean, by way of background, and I would have said this a year ago when I came before the committee on this issue, there was a failed attempt to recruit a CEO of the HSE back in 2018. The whole process had to be aborted because it wasn't possible to get a candidate, and I think the salary at the time was over €300,000, and ended up being increased further, as you know, for the present incumbent who successfully came through the process ultimately. But to your question about it becoming a reference point, I do not believe that that is the case, nor have I seen any evidence of that across the civil or the public service in the past 12 months or so. And certainly I do not view it as a reference point. There was a decision taken that given that there was a vacancy in the department at a time of national crisis, on the same day pretty much the former minister, the previous minister and the then Secretary General departed the Department of Health. And in the summer of 2020 there was a leadership vacuum, and there was no easy way of filling that or addressing that, and the view was arrived at that we did want to go to the market to get the best candidate who would put him or herself forward, and it was agreed that there would be an increased salary for the position of Secretary General in the Department of Health. And then you know what happened subsequently. We had that open competitive process, and some months later an appointment was made. But I just think it's important to make those points by way of context as well.
Okay, good, Margaret. Ara, you say that you can never go far enough, but you did go far enough for Robert Watt, clearly, in relation to the wage there. I think it's really interesting, Minister, and it's quite startling that you say that this is not going to form part of a benchmark or a reference point in relation to other salaries within the public service. Because what you're saying there actually is, yeah, this figure is not part of any process. It's independent of any system. It's independent of any reference points whatsoever. That this is actually a personal deal. If you're saying that this is not a benchmark, it's not possible to use this as a benchmark in future. If you're saying that if someone does come and say, well, my salary is, should be 90% of this particular salary, and you say, well, no. If your answer is no, if your answer is actually this is a personal deal with a particular individual in a particular role, insulated, isolated from everybody else's role within the civil service, you are simply underlining, reinforcing that whole point that this committee has made, that this is an individual wage for an individual person.
Yeah, first of all, Deputy, I think you need to be very careful about saying that this is a personal deal of some kind. This was a decision made about the salary for a post, the post of Secretary General of the Department of Health. And that decision was made, and the post went out to an open public competition advertised in Ireland and internationally. And the selection of the successful candidate was recommended by the top level appointments committee. So I don't think you should be calling into question the character or the good name of the people involved in that process by saying this was... No, hold on now, Deputy. Let me finish. Let me make the point. You made an accusation that this was a personal deal. And you are, in my view, impugning the good name and character of all of the people who were involved in that selection process. And I don't believe that that is fair, and I don't believe that that is accurate. Yeah, of course, I'm sure the Chairman will give you loads of time to respond. When it comes to the question of the case being made by others that this is the benchmark or the anchor now for future public pay policy, people make cases all the time for pay increases. There are pay claims coming in constantly, Deputy. But I would ask you to point to an example where the salary associated with this post has led to wage inflation elsewhere across the system. And if you have an example,
are wages not benchmarked in the public sector?
Can you explain? What do you mean?
Are wages at different grades benchmarked against each other within the public sector?
So we have, as you know, across the system of Secretaries General a number of tiers at the moment, and in effect now we have 4 tiers or levels of Secretaries General, and in drawing up the terms of reference for the independent review panel, that is an issue that I will examine, because I think there is merit in looking at the respective tiers that are there, because we've had significant transfer of functions in recent years, and I think we need to have a fresh look at that whole area. But it's not about bringing anyone up to a certain level or to have a benchmark that we're working towards. That's not my mindset, Deputy, and I can assure you that anyone that makes the case that they should be getting an increase in pay because of the post of the SecGen in the Department of Health, they won't get a good audience from me.
So is the post in the of the Secretary General in the Department of Health one of those 4 tiers?
So we have currently Secretaries General working across government at a number of those tiers, and what I will not be asking any independent review panel to do is to examine figures and to make recommendations to me about pay levels. That is not what this is about. What it is about, however, is examining the process, and they can make recommendations. And as I said, you and your colleagues have already made a recommendation that we would set up a higher remuneration review body. Now, I'm not clear whether your intention there is that such a body would decide pay, and therefore that the legislation underpinning my role, or the future incumbents in this role, their power to make that decision, whether you're suggesting that that would be removed and given to an independent body outside of the Oireachtas. I'm not sure. You might wish to provide clarity on that, or whether you're saying that such a body would make a recommendation to the Minister. But currently, under the law, it is the Minister that makes the decision.
I'm only asking you, Minister, are salaries benchmarked against you? I asked you, was this wage part of those 4 tiers? I didn't get an answer for that. I didn't get a benchmarking answer with regards to public
I'll give you a simple answer. There's no benchmarking Deputy, sorry, there's no benchmarking process underway.
My point is that salaries operate in comparison to each other within. They relate to each other. They're not independent of each other within. And the question that I've asked you in relation to this particular salary, you've given an answer to say this particular salary is fully independent, isolated from all other salaries, and will not be used as a benchmark, will not be used as a tool by anybody to look for a salary increase in future, which reiterates the point of the report and of the public concern around this, that this whole salary debacle was actually independent of any process, any system, and any relation to other people's salaries.
But Deputy, I've already said to you that people will always make the case for a pay increase, and they will always point to somebody else and say, why are they earning that and why am I earning this? But I've also given you a very clear statement that, well, first of all, no one has made that case to me in relation to this particular post. Nobody has. And if anybody did and was seeking a pay increase on the basis of a perceived relativity with that particular post, that's not something I would sanction. It's a matter for future. It's a matter for future ministers what they might decide to do.
One final question. There's obviously this government sees itself as a government of fiscal prudence, and one in which it regularly tells people to lower their expectations with regards to pay rises. And actually, we have whole sectors of the public services, such as the defence forces, who have been waiting for pay rises for a long period of time and have been refused them. And yet we have this significant largesse at this critical level of the civil service. The last question is this wage performance related?
So, Deputy, there is a system of accountability in place, and it is a matter for each minister, working with their Secretary General, to agree the strategy for the department for the year ahead, to agree the business plan for the department for the year ahead, and then to sit down on an ongoing basis and monitor performance and discuss the achievement of the milestones that are set out. That is the basis on which I certainly operate and run my own department. It is in a spirit of collaboration, and I think we all expect the highest standards of performance from the people who are sitting at the top of the civil service in our respective departments. Okay. And I certainly do, and I certainly get that performance as well.
Cases such as the Kerry situation with CAMS happen in the future, and that will have maybe a downward effect on that wage.
Sorry, Deputy, can you repeat that?
So, for example, the country is quite shocked at what happens with regards mental health services for children in Kerry in the report that was just released. So if other cases of HSE failings of children in this country reoccur in the future, that could have a downward effect potentially on the salary of nearly €300,000 for the SecGen.
You know, Deputy, I don't think that is necessarily fair to directly conflate those issues. I mean, what happened in Kerry in relation to the provision of services was an appalling failure that should never have happened. And of course, the current leadership of the Department of Health and the current leadership of the HSE have a deadly serious job of work to do now to fix that and to support those families in any way that they can. But linking it to a reduction in someone's salary,
I'm just
it's just not. It's just not.
Performance minister. Surely there's accountability, and you mentioned that there is a performance inflation element to this value.
And as I said, it is a matter for the line minister to come to a view as to the performance of his or her Secretary General. It's not for me to judge the performance of another Secretary General in their day-to-day work.